gentle souls. Seanorama, SeanGeek podcast. Well, last night was a monumental night. Finished off Jessica Jones, the TV series. And, wow, was it ever fantastic. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. Now, those that follow the show know that I am a big Jessica Jones fan. But let's go back in time just a touch here, and to offer some retrospective and some background on my love for the character. I came along with this character back when the comic was out, and it was one of those comics that was getting a lot of buzz, that people were talking about. I mean, I'm a comic nerd through and through. It's probably my greatest passion, or one of my greatest passions, or it's been with me the longest, I guess I could say. And I'm actually on an upswing with comic books now, which I'll touch on a little bit of that later if I got some time. But anyway, I mean, I'm a fan from the comic book days for Jessica Jones. You know, did I read the series from the beginning? No. I think I was about 4 or 5 issues in, and then I was in right from the get-go. So when this series came out, there was a show on television called Alias, and the name of the Jessica Jones comic was called Alias. It wasn't called Jessica Jones, it was called Alias, which was the name of her investigation firm, Alias Investigations, right? And I remember there being a little bit of confusion with the series, because, you know, I heard, Alias Investigations, it's got the character's name is Jessica. I'm like, oh, okay. My first thought was, this is Spider-Woman, right? I mean, the art style by Gatos. Gatos is one of my favorite artists, for sure, because of this series. Him and Maleev was doing Daredevil at the time. Anyway, just absolutely great stuff. And I glommed onto the comic book because I'm like, okay, is this a tie-in to the TV show? Because there was a similarity between the logo, but also, I mean, it was called Alias. The show was called Alias. There was parts of the logo that looked the same as the TV show, and I was definitely a huge mark for the Alias TV show. And you know, it's that show that made me a lifelong fan of J.J. Abrams. Anyway, so that's kind of why I got it. And then back then I was buying a lot of titles. It's probably the largest amount of titles I was buying was during that time. And, you know, it seemed interesting. And it was from this guy who was getting a lot of critical acclaim. And I was also collecting Daredevil at the time. And I was enjoying Daredevil, so I was like, okay, this guy's doing another book. I'll go check it out. This is Brian Michael Bendis. This is kind of, he'd gotten some indie cred. You know, people were looking at him a little bit differently in the industry, but he hadn't really quite hit that watermark yet. I mean, he brought Daredevil back into the top, as a top 10 comic, or probably a top 20 comic at that point. And now he was doing Alias. So I'm like, great, you know, awesome. So anyway, there was a bit of confusion getting into the series, you know, why I was collecting and all this, but, you know, an issue or two in, I'm like, this is really good. So I never removed it from my pull list. I just kept getting it, and collected it right to the bitter end. And then I also followed the series in its next incarnation, which was called The Pulse, which was post-Alias, What's Jessica Jones Up To? Which was, I don't know, 4 issues or something like that. I can't remember now. I think I eventually bought the trade for it. Anyway, I was a fan, and then when I heard that Netflix was going to do, they were going to do some Marvel shows, And I heard they're doing Daredevil. I got really excited because I thought the Daredevil was going to be akin to the Brian Michael Bendis run, which it was in a lot of ways, but it also paid huge homage to Frank Miller's run. So, you know, paired two great books from Brian Michael Bendis with two amazing artists, and then we got two shows on Netflix that have an amazing visual style. And like right out of the gate, Netflix launching those two shows, everyone was kind of like, holy crap, this really, really works. And at the time, when Daredevil had come out, Jessica Jones wasn't quite out yet. I devoured Daredevil when it came out the first season. And I'm like, this might be the future of Marvel here. There was so many things about the show that were so good that were far superior to the films. There's some stories that are not told well in 1 or 2 hour setting. Some characters and some stories work better in the 2 hour setting of a film. Iron Man being the most notable. I find with the Iron Man film, it was perfect for cinema, and the reason it was perfect for cinema was this isn't a diss, but I guess it is a bit, but I couldn't sit through 500 issues of an Iron Man comic. To me, it wasn't that interesting. And in some ways, I find that first movie encapsulated the best points of 500 issues or whatever it was, 300 issues of Iron Man. It worked so much better in a 2 hour window. They were able to take all the best things of those years, and make it into one great film. But Daredevil has had too many great runs that you don't want to mash a bunch of it up into one film. Like the Daredevil film that came out with Ben Affleck in it was kind of the same idea, where they just, okay, we're going to take a bunch of stuff, and we're going to take Elektra, and we're going to take Bullseye, and we're going to take, and it's just like they've got one kick at the can to make this good. So they truncate storylines, in a hero that needs room to breathe. You need time to tell their stories. And maybe with a superpowered guy like a Superman or something, it might be easier to tell it in the span of a film. But for a character like Daredevil that's so nuanced, why would someone without powers, essentially, with minimal powers, why would they go out and fight crime, but they're blind? Like, what drives someone to do what they do, to take the beatings that he takes? What? It works so much better. Now with Jessica Jones, further to that was the run was award winning. It only ran for, I believe, 28 issues, of which I collected them all, and then I collected them all in trade later because I wanted them all. Still got my eyes on getting an omnibus of the whole thing. The omnibus was pulled off the market and now it's been put back on, but I've since bought all the trades. It's one of those things that you really need to own in a hardcover. It is that great a run. It's just phenomenal. It's really, really good. So with Netflix deciding to do Jessica Jones, which was a risky proposition because as award-winning as it was, I don't think Jessica Jones is on the level of a Spider-Man or Daredevil or anything like that. And to use that as a linchpin in your Netflix series, it's kind of risky because she's not an unknown per se, but she's definitely not a known character. Not like a Daredevil. I mean, Daredevil was the highest prestige character they had. But anyway, but it worked well because there was only 28 issues. I think Jessica Jones, more than Daredevil, more than Luke Cage or any of the other ones, made the most sense to do as a series. Had that been put into a movie and they did the whole Purple Man thing, I don't think you would have got to know the character, and she would have just been some other, like She-Hulk type character, someone who's really strong, who's got some attitude, whose morals are a little loose, with the drinking and everything else. But it worked so well thing was, like, they did follow along fairly closely, but there's certain things that they had to change. So number one was they had to use a best friend for Jessica, because, I mean, you know, one of the important parts of the series is her friendship with her buddies, but primarily Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and it was pretty clear they were trying to do something special with Carol, and they were going to make a movie and all this sort of stuff, and they didn't want to relegate her to TV. They wanted to save her for the big screen. And I agree with Captain Marvel, and the big screen makes sense. And using her as a secondary character in a TV show maybe makes less sense. So they had to find somebody they could use to be her best friend. Who are you going to use? You know, they threw Luke Cage in there, which was easy because they're doing a Luke Cage TV show. That worked. But who are you going to find to replace Carol Danvers? Someone equitable, but not the same. So instead of aping what they did in the comics, they went in a completely different direction, and they used Patsy Walker, who is really a D-level character. Interesting character, don't get me wrong, definitely an interesting character. But I think by using Patsy Walker, it kind of made more sense. In fact, in some ways, in the TV show, Patsy Walker fits better than Carol Danvers did. And there's some things they had to change. There was a storyline with Captain America that they couldn't, they weren't going to use. There was a whole thing with Ant-Man, which is great. And I think if they had done maybe a 4th or 5th season, we actually would have got the chance to maybe see Speedball in there, because Speedball was interesting as all get out. Like, that was one of my favorite parts of the comic series, was the whole Speedball angle and everything that came out of that. And maybe part of that angle could have worked into a 4th or 5th season. And that was the angle where there was a new drug on the street called MGH, I think, growth hormone. So it's kind of on par with what's going on in the real world, where people are taking growth hormones. But this one, if you take a superhero one, the DNA off a superhero, you get their powers for a very short span of time, equivalent to what you get on a high in crack or something like that, right? So, I mean, street level stuff. Like, it was good street level storytelling. And really, I find that the season 1 kind of started off and mirrored a fair amount off the comic, but they kind of made it their own, especially because they had Patsy Walker, and that brought a whole other side that really played out so well in the TV show. The TV show is excellent. It is probably some of the best television you're going to get. And by limiting that series to 3 seasons, it does work. It does finish well. The last season is incredibly strong. I know some people didn't really like the second season as well, and I would agree that it was, maybe they could have grabbed a different storyline, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. The third season, the way the slow build, that by the time you're halfway through the season, you're on a freight train with no brakes, and you got to hang on for dear life. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they're going to do. And the villain, Salinger, who those of you don't know, is Fool Killer from the comic books. What an interesting take on this character that, in so many ways, far exceeded the comic version. That shouldn't be happening. The on-screen version should never be better than the comic version, but man, oh man, so much better. I mean, I was a big fan of Fool Killer in the comics. Fool Killer was kind of also a basis for my favorite villain, who was called the Scourge of the Underworld. Excuse me. Anyway, the season's great. I can't say enough. And interesting enough, one of the guys from work, he collects Loot Crate stuff. And one of the Loot Crate rewards was an action figure of Jessica Jones, which totally made my day. Yeah, excuse me. Bit of a sore throat here. But I've got that action figure featured prominently on my desk. One of my favorite things. It is just amazing. The show is so great. I mean, do yourself a favor. It's on Netflix. Most of you have Netflix already, so it's not going to cost you a dime to watch. Go watch the show. Season 1, Season 3 are phenomenal. Season 2 is pretty good. If you've watched anything, you probably only watched Daredevil, which we're watching Season 3 now. Because I'll be honest, I was way more excited to see Jessica Jones than I was Daredevil. Although Daredevil was incredibly good. Very well done. In terms of the other series on there, Luke Cage I did quite enjoy. It was different. The pacing and everything else was different. But it didn't make it any less of a great show. Iron Fist, I'm still a season behind on Iron Fist. Just about to start season 2. I liked Iron Fist for what it was. But again, when you're writing about a character who's not supposed to be likable, and the audience doesn't like the character, and they're like, well, this sucks. Well, yeah, the character's not a likable character. I think in the comics he worked well playing off of Luke Cage, and honestly, I think they could have done Luke Cage power, like they could have done them both, maybe, halfway, or done half seasons of each, feeding into each other. But Luke Cage, again, he has almost a more interesting history for this type of TV show. I think Iron Fist less so for this type of TV show. But that being said, I'm gonna watch that soon. Interestingly enough, I've never watched the Punisher one, and honestly, Punisher is one of my lesser favorite characters. I have collected some Punisher, a fair amount of Punisher throughout the years, but it's always been based on the team doing the book that I've gotten off on that comic book and enjoyed it. But as a character, really, I mean, it's in some ways it's nothing more than an 80s action movie hero with a skull on his chest, which I mean I don't dislike, but it was almost like a comic book. Punisher is a comic book version of an action hero. Marvel jumping on a bandwagon, kind of like, they jumped on the martial arts bandwagon at one point. They had Shang-Chi. To me, it doesn't resonate with me, even though I did enjoy the character in Daredevil. It was one of the low points of the show for me. I mean, it wasn't bad, but for as good as the rest of Daredevil was, Punisher just didn't do it for me as much. I don't know. But anyway, I mean, that's Jessica Jones, man. Go watch it. Go check it out. It's really good. But even more so, you can buy the trade paperbacks. I think they've got, the ones I bought are I think it, works up to 5 trade paperbacks for 28 issues. They're all, $15, $16 a piece, which isn't bad. You can buy the omnibus for, $150. A little bit pricey. But I think you could probably also buy the trade paperbacks, just larger versions, probably for $30-$40 a pop. But do yourself a favor. This is some brilliant writing. Much like on the show, I cannot believe the writing on a TV show that is at this caliber. There's not too many shows that are of this caliber, and to be honest, a show like Breaking Bad, which was a perfect show in many ways, it was so well written, so well paced, so well laid out. Jessica Jones, in a different way, it's not the same type of show at all, but I think the writing is excellent, and as a writer, watching how this is put together, how the show is shaped, how they work through the characters, seeing the character arcs, there's so many different characters that have their own arcs, the balancing act of giving everybody screen time and giving them purposeful, meaningful character arcs is rather impressive, but they're still servicing the story, which I don't know, man, it's pretty damn cool. So 2 thumbs up, 2 thumbs way up. This show is just phenomenal. I can't say enough. And in some ways, this might be the best literal representation of a comic book character put to film. I don't think anything has come this close to capturing. I mean, this is perfect. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the casting, and I've talked. This is probably my fourth go around on this, but oh my God, Robert Downey was perfect casting. He was so perfectly cast as Iron Man. No, he wasn't. He wasn't perfectly cast. What happened with Iron Man, and I said this before, is that they found an actor who could create a new invention, a new version of Tony Stark, and that's the Tony Stark that the comics emulated, and all of a sudden Tony Stark from the comics was indistinguishable from Tony Stark the movie version. But before Robert Downey Jr. came online with the character, on screen with the character, that wasn't Tony Stark. He wasn't that character. He wasn't really humorous, quippy. He wasn't like that. Womanizer, yeah, they got that right. A bit of an alcoholic. Well, they made him a bit of an alcoholic in the films, but they made him a true alcoholic in the comic books. But anyway, I mean, I do much prefer the screen version of Tony Stark. I do. I quite enjoy it. I think it's great. The Chris Evans version of Captain America on screen, I love his version of Captain America, but does it match the comics? Not really. But I don't know if I always need a completely literal representation. Even Tom Holland's not, a perfect Spider-Man. Is he the best Spider-Man we've got? I would say so. There's pieces of it that was sorely missing in the other two actors that played Spider-Man. But I still think the other two guys did a great job with Spider-Man. Like, I honestly think they did. But that being said, I love Tom Holland's version. Is he the perfect epitome? No. But, I mean, he's so good. I like this version of Spider-Man. I really do. But, Jessica Jones, man, the casting, I was not on board when I heard it was Kristen Ritter, because, I mean, I'm familiar with her work. I'm not a huge fan, but I definitely, like the actress, for sure. And, her turn in Breaking Bad, of all things, was really, really good. I was like, oh my God. And then we watched her show, I can't remember what it's called, that BITCH from Apartment 23 or something like that. We watched that show, and she's a completely different character again. And we also saw in a couple other movies, like, she's a good actress. Like, and she really threw herself in this role. And I mean, they get a lot of it, just even the way she dresses, the way she walks, the way she carries herself, that's sullen look in her eyes. Like, she obviously went very, I don't know if she went method or not into it, but everything about her, the way she stands, the way she sits, I mean, she's not very feminine, but she can be very feminine. That's all pulled right from the comic books. And I know there was, some people were like, well, she's not supposed to be a supermodel. Kristen Ritter was a supermodel. But she found a way to, to dumb down the beauty, the physical beauty, and make it more about, she's just a great character, I mean, she did an immense job. I really, really hope they find some way to bring, if they're going to bring any of the characters back, from the Netflix stuff, I really want to see Kristen Ritter back. I really do. It's one of those things where you don't want anyone to play Iron Man anymore than Robert Downey Jr. or you don't. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Chris Evans is Captain America. You don't want anyone else in those roles, and I wholeheartedly agree. My fear is that they make a Jessica Jones, they add her to something later, and they don't use Kristen Ritter because there's no one else you can use. And I really want to see the rest of the storyline play out with her and Luke Cage. I really do. I think her and Luke need to make it to the big screen. I really do. I really do. Daredevil was great, but he works really good in a TV show setting. The actor did a good job, and as a reward for the great job that he did, I think it'd be great if they could carry him over, but again, I don't know. Jessica Jones, I don't want to see go away. I really don't. All right, that's it, folks. We'll see you guys on the flip side.